There's a moment in life when everything you think you know comes crashing down, a moment that leaves you gasping for air as the truth claws its way into your soul. For me, that moment began with something as innocuous as a glance at my husband's phone screen. My name is Lisa, I'm 41, and I've been a stay-at-home mom for most of my adult life. My husband, Peter, is 48 and works in finance. Together, we built what I thought was a stable, loving family. We have 2 children, Ethan, our 18-year-old son, and Lily, who's 15. Ethan is in his final year of high school and has been dating his girlfriend Chloe for several years. Chloe is a sweet girl, someone I've come to think of as family. I never imagined that Chloe would become the catalyst for the darkest chapter of my life. It started one evening when Peter was scrolling through his phone at the dinner table. I had just finished clearing the dishes when I caught a glimpse of a text notification that flashed across his screen. The message was from Chloe, and it read, "I miss the way you made me feel last night." My heart skipped a beat, my mind immediately trying to rationalize what I'd seen. It must have been a misunderstanding, I told myself. Maybe she sent the text to the wrong person. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. But the pit in my stomach told me otherwise. That night, as Peter showered, I wrestled with myself. I'm not proud of it, but I grabbed his phone, unlocked it using the passcode I knew by heart, and went straight to his messages. What I found confirmed my worst fears. There were dozens of texts between him and Chloe, filled with flirtatious exchanges, explicit language, and intimate details about their time together. It was undeniable, they were having an affair. It wasn't just the affair that broke me, it was the things they said about me. In one thread, Peter joked about how boring and predictable I was, describing me as someone who sucked the life out of a room. Chloe replied with laughing emojis, agreeing that I was outdated and trying too hard to stay relevant. I scrolled through message after message, each one like a dagger to my heart. Peter didn't just cheat on me, he humiliated me, using the vulnerabilities I had confided in him as ammunition for his jokes. And Chloe, the girl I had welcomed into my home, had joined in, laughing at my expense. For the next few days, I carried the weight of that knowledge like a boulder strapped to my chest. Every interaction with Peter and Chloe felt surreal, like I was watching a twisted version of my life unfold. Peter acted as if nothing had changed, kissing me goodbye before leaving for work, texting me reminders about errands, and sitting down to dinner with our family as if he weren't living a double life. Chloe, too, showed no signs of guilt. She came over after school to hang out with Ethan, laughing with him in the living room and chatting with me in the kitchen like nothing was amiss. It made my stomach churn to see her so at ease, knowing what she and Peter were doing behind all of our backs. I knew I couldn't stay silent forever, but I also knew I couldn't confront Peter without concrete evidence. So I began documenting everything. Late at night, when Peter was asleep, I accessed his phone again and took screenshots of their text messages. I searched his laptop and found a folder hidden deep in his files labeled Personal. Inside were explicit photos, videos, and saved images of Chloe from her social media accounts. Some were innocent enough, selfies of her fully clothed, but the fact that he had them saved was damning. It didn't stop there. I found receipts for purchases on OnlyFans, dating apps, and even a hotel booking from just 2 weeks prior. The evidence piled up, each discovery another blow to the life I thought I had. In hindsight, the signs had been there all along. Over the past year, Peter had become more distant, more irritable, and more secretive with his phone. He would stay late at work or disappear on weekends, claiming he needed time to decompress. I had dismissed it as the stress of his demanding job. There were other red flags too, like the thong I found in our bedroom a few months ago. It wasn't mine, and it definitely wasn't Lily's, but when I asked Peter about it, he shrugged it off, saying it must have gotten mixed up with the laundry somehow. I wanted to believe him, so I let it go. I even noticed how Peter seemed unusually attentive to Chloe. At family gatherings, he would go out of his way to compliment her or sit near her, brushing it off as him being friendly. I convinced myself it was innocent, that I was overthinking things. But now, with the truth laid bare, I realized how blind I had been. Or perhaps it wasn't blindness at all, perhaps it was a refusal to see the cracks forming in the foundation of my marriage. As the days turned into weeks, I began to formulate a plan. I knew I couldn't confront Peter without thinking through the consequences, especially for Ethan and Lily. How would Ethan react to learning that his girlfriend was involved with his father? How could I shield Lily from the fallout? I also feared Peter's reaction. He had never been physically violent, but his temper was unpredictable. If I confronted him without a clear strategy, there was no telling how he might respond. I reached out to my brother, Mark, who had always been my rock. When I told him what I had discovered, he was furious on my behalf, but he urged me to be careful. "You need to protect yourself and the kids first," he said. "Gather all the evidence you can and talk to a lawyer before you make any moves." Taking his advice, I began to meticulously document everything. I printed out screenshots, saved files to an external drive, and even took photos of Peter's hidden stash of sex toys and costumes. I researched divorce attorneys and found one who specialized in cases involving infidelity and abuse. The final straw came one evening when I overheard a phone call between Peter and Chloe. He was in his office with the door slightly ajar, and I caught snippets of their conversation. "I can't wait to see you again. I've been thinking about last night all day. She has no idea, I'm telling you, she's completely clueless." I felt like I might throw up. My hands shook as I stood there, frozen, listening to the man I had shared my life with gloat about his deceit. In that moment, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. The time had come to act. I spent the night after hearing Peter's phone call staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with 1,000 questions. How could he do this? What would happen to Ethan if he found out? And Lily, how could I protect her from this nightmare? I felt trapped, drowning in my own helplessness. But one thing was clear, I couldn't live like this anymore. The next morning, I contacted a divorce attorney, a woman named Valerie who came highly recommended by my brother. She was tough, empathetic, and thorough, exactly what I needed. Over the phone, I explained the situation as best I could without breaking down. Valerie assured me that we could take steps to protect me and the kids while preparing for the divorce. "The most important thing right now is evidence," she said. "Keep documenting everything, and don't confront him until you're ready. You want to be in control when the time comes." Her words gave me a small sense of power in a situation where I'd felt powerless for weeks. Before I could confront Peter, I knew I had to tell Ethan and Lily the truth. It wasn't fair to keep them in the dark, especially since this betrayal involved Ethan so deeply. But how do you tell your son that his father is having an affair with his girlfriend? How do you shatter his world like that? I decided to start with Lily. One evening, after Peter had left for work, I asked her to sit with me in the living room. "Lily, there's something I need to talk to you about," I began, my voice trembling. She looked up from her phone, her brow furrowed with concern. "What's wrong, Mom?" I took a deep breath and explained, as gently as I could, what I had discovered. I didn't go into the explicit details, but I told her enough to understand the gravity of the situation. At first, she stared at me in disbelief, her mouth opening and closing as she struggled to find words. "Dad, and Chloe," she finally whispered. I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I wish I didn't have to tell you this, but I need you to know the truth." Her face contorted with anger and disgust. "How could he do that? To you? To Ethan? What kind of person is he?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I promise you, we're going to get through this. I'm going to protect you and Ethan, no matter what." Lily hugged me tightly, her body shaking with sobs. "I hate him," she said through gritted teeth. I can't believe I ever looked up to him. Telling Ethan was even harder. I waited until the weekend, when I could take him somewhere private. We drove to a park we used to visit when he was younger, parking under the shade of a large oak tree. Ethan, I need to talk to you about something really serious, I began, my hands gripping the steering wheel to steady myself. He looked at me with concern. What's going on, Mom? Is everything okay? No, I said, my voice breaking. It's not okay. It's about your dad and Chloe. At the mention of their names, his expression shifted to confusion. What about them? I struggled to find the words, my throat tight with emotion. I found out that your dad has been having an affair with Chloe. For a moment, he just stared at me, his face blank. Then, slowly, the realization set in. No, he said, shaking his head. That's not possible. Chloe wouldn't. Dad wouldn't. I'm so sorry, Ethan, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But it's true. I've seen the messages. I've seen the photos. I wish it weren't real, but it is. He clenched his fists, his breathing ragged. How long has this been going on? I don't know for sure, I admitted. But I think it started not long after Chloe turned 18. He slammed his fist against the dashboard, tears streaming down his face. How could he do this to me? To us? And Chloe, how could she do this? I reached out to him, but he pulled away, his body trembling with anger and heartbreak. I don't want to talk about this anymore, he said, his voice raw. I need to be alone. I watched him storm off into the park, my heart breaking for him. There was nothing I could do to take away his pain, but I hoped that, in time, he would find a way to heal. After telling Ethan and Lily, I reached out to Chloe's mother, Karen. We met at a local coffee shop, and I explained everything I had discovered. Karen was horrified, her face pale as I showed her the evidence. I can't believe this, she said, shaking her head. Chloe always looked up to Peter. She said he was like a second father to her. He manipulated her, I said. I'm sure of it. This isn't her fault, he took advantage of her trust. Karen's hands trembled as she picked up her coffee cup. I need to talk to Chloe. She needs to understand what he's done. Later that evening, Karen called me, her voice filled with frustration. Chloe admitted to the relationship, but she doesn't see it as wrong. She says they're in love and that she's an adult who can make her own decisions. She's been groomed, I said, my anger boiling. He's twisted her perception of what's normal. Karen agreed to confiscate Chloe's phone and provide me with copies of their messages. The texts she shared only confirmed what I already knew. Peter had been manipulating Chloe for months, if not years. With the evidence in hand, I decided it was time to confront Peter. I didn't feel safe doing it in person, so I arranged a Zoom call while the kids and I stayed at my brother's house. When Peter appeared on the screen, he looked disheveled, his usual confident demeanor replaced by something more frantic. What's this about? He asked, his voice sharp. I know about you and Chloe, I said, my voice steady despite the rage simmering inside me. His face turned red, his eyes darting around. I don't know what you're talking about. I've seen the messages, Peter, I said, holding up printed copies. I've seen the photos. Don't insult me by pretending you don't know. He slammed his fist on the desk, his voice rising. You don't understand the context. None of this is what it looks like. Context? I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. You've been sleeping with our son's girlfriend and mocking me behind my back. What context could possibly justify that? His defensiveness turned to anger. You've always been paranoid, Lisa. Always looking for something to blame me for. I'm not blaming you, I'm holding you accountable, I shot back. And I've already spoken to a lawyer. This marriage is over. He stared at me, his face a mix of rage and panic. You can't take my kids away from me. You did that yourself, I said, my voice cold. You destroyed this family, Peter. Not me. I ended the call before he could say another word, my hands shaking as I closed the laptop. After my confrontation with Peter, everything felt surreal. There was a numbness that settled over me, a haze of disbelief mixed with the gnawing fear of what would come next. I had braced myself for Peter's anger, but his denial and deflection were even more maddening. Despite the mountain of evidence, he still refused to admit what he had done. His reaction left me shaken, but I also felt resolute. I had taken the first step toward reclaiming my life. The impact on Ethan and Lily was immediate and devastating. Ethan withdrew into himself, spending long hours locked in his room or going for aimless drives to escape the suffocating reality. He hadn't spoken to Chloe since learning the truth, but I could tell the betrayal had cut him deeply. She wasn't just his first love, she was someone he trusted implicitly, and now that trust had been shattered. One evening, I found him sitting on the back porch, staring out into the darkened yard. I sat beside him, unsure if he wanted company, but he didn't tell me to leave. I feel like an idiot, he finally said, his voice low and filled with pain. How could I not see it? How could I not know? You're not an idiot, Ethan, I said softly. You trusted her. That's not a flaw, it's a sign of your strength. It's Peter and Chloe who are to blame, not you. He shook his head, his jaw clenched. I keep replaying every moment in my head, trying to figure out when it started. Was it when she stopped texting me as much? Or when she started dressing up more to come over? He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. It doesn't even matter, does it? The damage is done. I put my arm around him, but he didn't lean into me. He was still too raw, too guarded. It matters to me, I said. Because you matter. And no matter how hard this gets, we'll get through it together. Lily, on the other hand, was a storm of emotions. She vacillated between seething anger and quiet sadness, often snapping at me or Ethan over small things. She refused to speak Peter's name, referring to him only as that man or him. One day, while cleaning her room, she uncovered a photo of our family from a few years ago. In the picture, Peter had his arm around her, both of them smiling brightly at the camera. She stared at it for a long moment before tearing it in half and throwing it in the trash. I hate him, she muttered, her voice trembling. I know, I said, pulling her into a hug. I know, sweetie. Karen, Chloe's mother, was struggling just as much as we were. Chloe had doubled down on her defense of Peter, claiming they were in love and that everyone else was blowing things out of proportion. Despite Karen's best efforts to reason with her, Chloe refused to see Peter as the manipulative predator he was. She's been sneaking out to see him, Karen confided in me during one of our phone calls. I don't know what to do anymore, Lisa. I've grounded her, taken away her phone, even threatened to call the police, but she just keeps defying me. She's been brainwashed, I said. Peter has her convinced that this is some kind of star-crossed romance. But it's not, it's abuse. Karen's voice broke. What if I've lost her for good? What if she never sees the truth? I didn't know how to answer. Chloe's blind loyalty to Peter was both infuriating and heartbreaking. I could only hope that, in time, she would come to understand the reality of what he had done to her. Valerie, my attorney, wasted no time filing for divorce, temporary custody of Lily, and a protective order against Peter. She also helped Karen file a separate restraining order on behalf of Chloe, though the situation was complicated by Chloe's insistence that their relationship was consensual. The courts don't look kindly on adults who prey on teenagers, even if they're of legal age, Valerie explained. We have enough evidence to show a pattern of grooming, and that's going to work in our favor. Despite this reassurance, I was constantly on edge. Peter's unpredictable behavior made me fear for our safety, and I couldn't shake the feeling that he might try to retaliate. Every time my phone buzzed or a car pulled into the driveway, my heart raced with panic. One afternoon, I received an email from Peter. The subject line read, "You're ruining my life." The message was as accusatory as I expected. "You're blowing this out of proportion, Lisa. You're trying to turn the kids against me and paint me as some kind of monster. I've been a good husband and father, and this is how you repay me? You need to stop this before you destroy our family completely." I forwarded the email to Valerie without responding. Let him think whatever he wanted, I wasn't going to engage with his delusions. As the weeks passed, the investigation into Peter's actions deepened. Karen and I had both provided statements to the authorities, detailing how Peter had groomed Chloe and manipulated her into a relationship. Ethan and Lily also gave statements about their father's behavior, though I hated putting them through the ordeal. Meanwhile, more evidence came to light. Through his call logs and online activity, we discovered that Peter had been using dating apps to target women in their late teens and early 20s. He had even joined online forums where he exchanged tips with other predators about how to connect with younger women. The revelations were horrifying but not surprising. Peter's actions weren't just a betrayal, they were part of a calculated pattern of exploitation. One evening, Peter showed up unannounced at my brother's house. I wasn't home at the time, but Ethan answered the door. When I returned, Ethan was livid. "He had the nerve to come here and act like nothing happened," Ethan fumed. "He tried to guilt-trip me into forgiving him, saying it was all a misunderstanding." "What did you say to him?" I asked, my heart pounding. "I told him to get lost," Ethan said. "And if he ever came back, I'd call the police." I hugged him tightly, my fear mixed with pride. Peter's attempts to manipulate Ethan had failed, but the encounter left me shaken. I immediately called Valerie, who assured me that the protective order would be enforced if Peter tried anything else. Despite the chaos, there were small moments of hope that kept me going. Ethan began attending therapy, where he started processing his feelings of betrayal and loss. His therapist told me he was making progress, though it would be a long road to recovery. Lily, too, found solace in art, pouring her emotions into vivid, expressive paintings that covered the walls of her room. One day, she showed me a piece she had been working on, a dark, stormy landscape with a single beam of light breaking through the clouds. "It's us," she said, pointing to the light. "No matter how bad things get, we'll find a way out." Her words brought tears to my eyes. Even in the midst of so much pain, my children were finding ways to persevere. With Peter out of the house and the protective order in place, there was finally some distance between us. But that didn't mean the storm had passed. If anything, it felt like the eye of the hurricane, a brief, fragile calm before the next wave hit. The divorce proceedings were underway, and I knew I had a long battle ahead. Valerie was confident we had enough evidence to secure custody of Lily and a favorable settlement, but Peter's unpredictable nature made every step feel precarious. He was fighting tooth and nail, sending frantic emails, making baseless accusations, and attempting to paint me as a vindictive wife bent on destroying him. While I focused on protecting my children and rebuilding my life, Karen continued to struggle with Chloe. Despite the protective order, Chloe was still sneaking out to see Peter. She had managed to acquire a second phone, hidden from her mother, that she used to stay in contact with him. Karen called me late one night, her voice fraught with worry. "I don't know what to do, Lisa. She's completely under his spell. She keeps saying they're in love, that I'm trying to ruin her life. She won't listen to reason." I wished I had an answer for her. Peter's manipulation had taken root so deeply in Chloe's mind that she couldn't see the truth. "All we can do is keep pushing for legal action," I said. "The more distance we can put between them, the better." Karen sighed. "She's threatened to leave, said she'll run away with him if I don't back off." "What am I supposed to do then?" We'll figure it out, I promised, though I wasn't sure how. A few days later, Karen called with an update. Chloe had finally broken down after a heated argument, admitting that Peter had been pursuing her long before she turned 18. It was a small victory, but it came with a heavy cost. Karen was now grappling with the realization that her daughter had been groomed and exploited. Ethan, meanwhile, had been growing stronger through therapy. One evening, as we sat in the living room, he opened up about his feelings in a way he hadn't before. "Do you think I should talk to Chloe?" he asked, his voice hesitant. The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Part of me wants to yell at her, tell her how much she hurt me. But another part of me just wants to understand why. How could she do this to me? To us?" I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. "Ethan, if you feel like you need closure, that's valid. But you need to protect yourself, too. Talking to her might not give you the answers you're looking for, it might just reopen old wounds." He nodded, his gaze distant. "Yeah. You're probably right." The next day, he came to me with a decision. "I'm done with her," he said firmly. "She made her choice, and I can't change that. I need to move on." I was proud of him, though I knew it wasn't an easy choice. As the legal battle escalated, Peter's carefully constructed facade began to crack. His employer had caught wind of the allegations against him, and though he hadn't been formally charged yet, they decided to terminate his position. Losing his job was a blow to Peter's ego, and I knew it was only a matter of time before he lashed out. Sure enough, I received a flurry of emails and text messages, each more erratic than the last. "This is all your fault," one message read. "You're ruining everything because you can't handle the fact that I moved on." Another message was more sinister: "You'll regret doing this to me, Lisa. Just wait." I forwarded everything to Valerie, who reassured me that the protective order would shield me and the kids. But the threats rattled me. Even with the distance between us, Peter's shadow loomed large. The authorities were making progress in their investigation. With Karen's help, they had uncovered evidence of Peter's grooming behavior, including messages that predated Chloe's 18th birthday. There were also indications that he had targeted other young women through dating apps and online forums. One of the investigators contacted me with an update. "We found several victims who are willing to come forward," she said. "This isn't just about Chloe anymore, it's about a pattern of predatory behavior." Hearing that was both a relief and a gut punch. I wanted justice, but the scope of Peter's actions was far worse than I had imagined. Despite the chaos, there were glimmers of hope. Ethan had thrown himself into his summer internship, finding solace in the routine and the chance to focus on something other than the nightmare at home. Lily had started seeing a therapist, though it took some coaxing to get her to go. After her first session, she came home looking more at ease than I'd seen her in weeks. "How was it?" I asked gently. "It was good," she admitted, surprising me. "I didn't think I'd like it, but it felt nice to talk to someone who isn't, part of all this." I hugged her, feeling a small weight lift off my shoulders. A few weeks later, Karen called with unexpected news: Chloe had agreed to attend therapy. "She's starting to see the cracks in his story," Karen said, her voice cautious but hopeful. "It's going to take time, but I think she's finally waking up." It was a bittersweet moment. Chloe's journey toward healing was just beginning, and I knew it would be a long and painful road. But the fact that she was taking the first step gave me hope that she might one day break free from Peter's influence. By the end of the summer, our lives had settled into a new rhythm. Ethan and Lily were preparing for the upcoming school year, and I was taking steps to re-enter the workforce. I had enrolled in a certification program to update my skills, determined to build a stable future for myself and the kids. The divorce was still ongoing, but Valerie assured me that the evidence against Peter was overwhelming. "You're going to come out of this stronger, Lisa," she said. "He won't win." I clung to her words like a lifeline. Months passed as the legal battles and investigation unfolded. Each day brought new challenges, but also small victories. The weight of Peter's actions hung over us like a storm cloud, but there were moments of clarity and hope that reminded me we were moving forward, however slowly. Peter's trial began in late autumn, and the lead-up was emotionally grueling. I had to prepare myself for the possibility of seeing him in court, of hearing his excuses and lies paraded in front of a judge and jury. The prosecution had built a strong case, with evidence from Chloe, Karen, and several other victims who had come forward during the investigation. Ethan and Lily were spared from having to testify, something I fought hard for. They had already been through enough, and I couldn't bear the thought of them facing Peter in a courtroom. The trial itself was a whirlwind of emotions. The prosecutor presented evidence of Peter's grooming behaviors, his interactions with Chloe before and after she turned 18, and his patterns of exploitation through dating apps and forums. One of the most damning testimonies came from a young woman named Jessica, who had met Peter on a dating app when she was just 17. She described how he manipulated her into believing their relationship was normal, only to discard her when she started setting boundaries. "He made me feel special," Jessica said, her voice trembling. "But it was all a lie. He didn't care about me, he just cared about control." Peter's defense tried to paint him as a victim of misunderstanding, claiming that his relationship with Chloe was consensual and that the other allegations were exaggerated. But his demeanor in court, cold, defensive, and unrepentant, did him no favors. When Chloe took the stand, it was clear she was conflicted. She still clung to the idea that she had willingly entered the relationship, but under cross-examination, cracks began to show. "He told me I was mature for my age," she admitted. "He said I understood him in a way no one else did." The prosecutor pressed her gently, leading her to acknowledge how Peter had isolated her from her friends and family, convincing her that their relationship was something extraordinary. By the end of the trial, the evidence was overwhelming. Peter was found guilty of corruption of a minor, possession of illicit materials, and engaging in a pattern of predatory behavior. He was sentenced to 12 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 8 years. It wasn't as long as I had hoped, but it was enough to ensure he couldn't hurt anyone else for a long time. After the trial, Karen called me with an update on Chloe. "She's been seeing her therapist regularly," Karen said. "It's slow, but she's starting to come to terms with what happened." Chloe had finally admitted that Peter's influence had been toxic and manipulative, though the realization had left her grappling with feelings of shame and confusion. She said to me the other day, "Mom, I thought it was love, but it wasn't, was it?" Karen's voice broke. "It's heartbreaking, but at least she's starting to see the truth." Chloe had a long journey ahead of her, but I was relieved to know she was on the path to healing. As the dust settled from the trial, I focused on rebuilding a life for myself and the kids. We moved into a small but cozy home in a quiet neighborhood, a space that was ours alone. It was a fresh start, free from the shadows of the past. Ethan threw himself into his college applications, determined to leave the turmoil behind and pursue his dreams. He was accepted to his first-choice university, a milestone that filled me with pride and hope for his future. Lily, too, was thriving in her own way. She continued to express herself through art, creating pieces that captured her resilience and strength. One of her paintings, a vibrant, colorful depiction of a phoenix rising from the ashes, became the centerpiece of our new home. "That's us," she said with a small smile when she showed it to me. "We're not broken, we're just starting over." For the first time in years, I began focusing on myself. Therapy became a cornerstone of my healing, helping me untangle the years of emotional manipulation and self-doubt that Peter had instilled in me. I also completed my certification program and began applying for jobs. It was daunting to re-enter the workforce after so many years, but I was determined to build a future where I could provide for my family independently. One day, as I was organizing paperwork, I stumbled across an old journal I had kept in my 20s. Flipping through the pages, I found entries filled with dreams and goals I had long since abandoned: traveling the world, learning a new language, starting a small business. For so long, I had defined myself solely as a wife and mother, sacrificing my own aspirations for the sake of my family. But now, I realized it was time to reclaim those dreams, to rediscover who I was beyond the roles I had been assigned. Ethan and Lily continued to amaze me with their resilience. Ethan had fully embraced his role as a college-bound young man, taking on leadership roles at school and mentoring younger students. He still attended therapy, and though he didn't talk about Chloe often, I could tell he had found closure. Lily's trust in people had been shaken, but she was slowly rebuilding it through her friendships and therapy. She even joined an art club at school, where she met other creative, like-minded teens who encouraged her to share her work. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, she turned to me and said, "Mom, I'm proud of us. We've been through hell, but we're still standing." Her words brought tears to my eyes. "I'm proud of us too," I said, hugging her tightly. Peter's presence in our lives had left scars, but they no longer defined us. We were healing, growing, and creating a new story, one that wasn't overshadowed by his actions. The support I had received from my brother, Karen, our friends, and even strangers had been a lifeline during the darkest moments. It reminded me that even in the midst of pain, there is kindness and light to be found. As I stood in our new home, looking at the phoenix painting Lily had created, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. We had survived the fire, and now we were rising, stronger and more united than ever. This was just the beginning of our new life, a life built on truth, love, and the unshakable bond we shared as a family.